Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors, informing leaders, inspiring solutions. I'm Sheryl White, and I'll be your lead co-host for today. And I'm delighted to have my co-host with me today, Dr. Undraye Howard, who we affectionately call Dr. Dre.
Hello.
Glad to have you in the house today.
Mhm.
And Dr. Loretta Howard, pleased to have you here as well.
Thank you. Always good to be here.
Yes. Today we're going to be discussing effective board governance and development. And joining us to have this conversation is Dr. Dwight Smith, General Counsel with the Neighborhood House Association in San Diego, California. Welcome, Dwight.
Hello, thank you.
And Sarah Lyman, Executive Director of Alliance Healthcare Foundation. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Yes, indeed. I'm glad and pleased to have both of you. We are always delighted and pleased when our audience sends in questions. This month, we're going to be focusing on effective board governance. So we invite you to continue to send in those items and those questions. We'll go over that information near the end of our episode today, in case you'd like to send in some questions for the future. We have two questions we'll focus on today. And co-host Dr. Dre, I'll ask you to answer first, and then Dr. Howard. But Dr. Smith and Ms. Lyman will ask you to also stay tuned. You might want to pipe in on our audience questions. So our first question for today is, what can be done to get and keep board members engaged? Dr. Dre, like to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I love our questions from our audience. Powerful questions. I think it all starts probably with engagement, right? Making sure that you have the right board member, making sure they know what they're getting into. So certainly looking for individuals who certainly have a passion for the mission, relevant experience, the time, understanding their fiduciary role on the board. I think all of that needs to be defined. That discussion needs to happen before you bring a member onto the board, so you're all on the same page. And then just keeping, the meetings meaningful, because, time is powerful and limited. So you want to make sure that when you have meetings, they're meaningful. There's good, clear role definition. You give feedback. You recognize the efforts of each board member too as part of that process to keep them engaged and to keep them excited as well. And then, of course, term limits, right? Term limits and rotation and some of the basic things you should keep in mind. I think that those would be important in terms of keeping board members engaged.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dre. Dr. Loretta, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I agree with everything Dr. Dre said, but also when board members begin, I think you need to truly give them clear expectations of what their role is, helping them onboarding. Sometimes with a new person, if you can pair them up with someone who's been there for a while, kind of help to mentor them and help them with that. And always the lines of communication need to be open so that they know that they can contact you, or you're giving them updates and making them aware of things that are going on. And I'm the kind of person who I like to still send cards, not necessarily e-cards, but cards, and write thank you notes to people. And some people still appreciate that. So even letting people know you just really appreciate them, and they have a little handwritten note or something from you.
Mhm. Love it. Thank you. Don't be bashing my e-cards.
Your e-cards, you brought me into this 21st century technology.
No, that's all good. So, Dr. Smith and Ms. Lyman, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'll just say I totally agree with the buddy system and methods to keep people connected. One thing I found effective is to make certain people remain focused on the mission of the organization, like things like a mission moment, have service recipients attend meetings so the board members can definitely see the work that they do translated directly to community impact. I think just part of the original selection process to ask a board member, like, why are they interested in this mission, and look for, genuine interest in the mission.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add, I agree with everything that's been said, and maybe another nuanced perspective is engagement grows when people feel truly useful, like they're, contributing something meaningful. They're not just a stamp, they're not just there for fundraising. So I always find it useful for the organization too to try to identify like what is the superpower that each member is bringing and try to leverage that. Maybe they're really insightful around group dynamics. Maybe they're super strategic thinker and you're stuck with an idea. And so finding little moments to engage individuals for the things that they bring to the board, I think increases engagement throughout the year when you're in more of a traditional meeting structure too.
Wonderful. Thank you all for
Yes.
responding to
Thank
that
you.
question, and thank you for sending that question in. So as we, I guess, look to dive a little deeper into this topic, Dr. Smith and Ms. Lyman, maybe starting with yourself, Dr. Smith, I'll ask you to share a little bit about yourself so that our audience has a glimpse into who you are and the perspective you bring.
Great. Thank you, Dr. White. So I've been a practicing attorney since 1982, raised in the Chicago area. I attended DePaul University. I have a degree in accounting. I also attended Notre Dame Law School. So upon graduation, I worked as corporate in-house attorney and with the boards of those entities. I've worked for several publicly traded companies. I worked in the banking, insurance, and technology areas. Then I've also worked for several nonprofits, including a large medical association in Chicago. I work with the San Diego Convention Center, which is a nonprofit, and also a neighborhood house association. So in each of these organizations, I've either had the pleasure of staffing the board requests, being staff that responds to the board. And I've also served as a member of several boards. So between my actually being a board member and staffing other boards, that's basically my experience for the topics we're discussing today.
Awesome. Thank you. How about yourself, Ms. Lyman?
Yeah, so my educational background and early career stems from the business sector. I have my MBA, kind of started my career in the private sector, but then for the most of the better part of my career, I've been in various leadership positions in nonprofits. Like Dwight, I've also served and currently serve on nonprofit boards. But for the last 6 years, I've been serving as the executive director for Alliance Healthcare Foundation, which is a grant maker, an impact investor here in San Diego. And in fact, our board was recently honored with a Trust Award for Excellence in Nonprofit Governance from the USD Nonprofit Institute. So this conversation is really timely. And I have the distinct honor of working alongside Dwight Smith in this capacity. He's a board member of ours. He's also the chair of our governance committee. So he's the perfect person to be interviewing for this and is a frequent thought partner for me on all issues governance.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Excellent. All right. And Ms. Lyman, I won't ask you how Dr. Smith is as a board member. We'll save that for later discussion. But for our listening audience, let me just ask a basic question, and I'll start with you, Ms. Lyman. What are the roles and responsibilities of public and nonprofit board members from your perspective?
Yeah, I think some of them are really straightforward, a duty to mission, kind of always centering the purpose, not ego, not institution, or even like personal interest areas, but the mission of the organization. There's, of course, fiduciary responsibility. And sometimes people think that's just about like maintaining a clean budget and clean books, but it goes beyond that. Does the organization have the resources it needs to achieve its mission? What might be needed to help grow those resources that are aligned with the financial and impact goals, vision setting, generative partnership, think like that, sort of shaping the why and the what, not micromanaging the how of the organization. And then really support and oversight of the executive director, really thought partnership, evaluation, accountability in partnership with leadership.
Great. Excellent. Dr. Smith, how about you? What are the roles, responsibilities of public and nonprofit board members?
Yeah, as an attorney, I typically go to, first of all, fiduciary duties, because I think those are the roles that if the board member understands that will be a great beginning towards navigating any difficulties. So when I speak of fiduciary duties, I've learned the acronym COAL, COAL. So C is basically the need to maintain, duty of care, right? That means you pay attention to red flags, you read the minutes, you attend meetings, you come prepared, right? So the duty of care, the duty of obedience, as you know, you follow the company protocols, the company policies and rules, civility rules, right? How we interact with one another, how we're respectful, how we give people, time and presence to say what they need to say. ACOALA would be accounting. Board members should have the right to financial budgets. They need to know the right to request information, accounting, how's the organization running, how's it meeting its budgets and things of that nature, right? And L, I just use that as loyalty. That's your confidentiality. That's avoiding conflict of interest. For a public board, I usually think their focus is on increasing shareholder value. Publicly traded companies, a public board, shareholder value. For a nonprofit board, I think the focus is usually dedicated on the mission. The mission can be serving a particular clientele. It's different than the financial goal. I just want to put it that way. Those are some of the main distinct roles I see.
Great. That's great. Thank you.
Dr.
Hey,
Loretta.
great.
Mhm.
Yeah. I love that acronym COLE. I was writing it down
Yeah.
to remember
Wonderful.
it. I really
Very
like
good.
that. I love
Coming from law
acronyms.
school for the bar exam, you got to learn little abbreviations. Cole. Okay, what is Cole? I never know, but fiduciary duties, you
That's
just break
great.
it down that way.
Yeah, that's great.
No, I love that acronym. So, my question for both of you is, how is the board setting policy and direction different from managing the operations of the organization? And Sarah, I'd like to start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I think for me, it's pretty clear. The management bucket are things that should clearly be in the realm of staff decision-making authority. So, like implementing programs, staffing or HR decisions, resource allocation within a board approved plan. Whereas governance is really helping set direction, what work matters now for our community? How do we best respond to the current climate? Are we maintaining alignment with our mission? And then maybe there's an occasional, helping course correct or point out blind spots or questions for the staff to consider in their day to day. And I really think that sort of future focused, bring us up a level thought partnership is where boards can really add tremendous value.
Mhm.
Right. Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm aware of our time here, but Dr. Smith, could you start answering the question?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with everything Sarah said. I like to think of it as the board will say, commission a portrait of someone. The CEO is to decide what type of paint, how that picture looks. So as Sarah mentioned, the board has the oversight, the long-term goals, outlines, general timelines, things are to be determined, right? And the CEO, executive director, that's the day-to-day. That's how things will be done. That's how they achieve to utilize their directive to get it done. It involves a lot of personal choice where they would rely upon their skills, their unique talents. And the board is the overarching, setting the general goal, the path. We want to be here in 10 years. The CEO, executive director will actually implement day-to-day strategies to reach that goal.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Yes, I'm sorry, Dr. Loretta, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say thank you for your answers.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I would say thank you both. We're going to take a short break. I know that you were looking at Dr. Loretta at the time there. And when we come back, you know, we understand that sometimes we have board members who want to be really helpful and they might dive a little deeper into operations. Wonder what your thoughts on, is that helpful? Are there challenges? And if so, what might those be? And then we'll go a little deeper into the board composition and some other thoughts you may have. So please stay with us and we'll be right back with more on Leadership Matters with the People Doctors, informing leaders, inspiring solutions. And we are back with more on Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors. Today, we're talking about effective board governance and development. And we have two fabulous guests helping us have this conversation. Dr. Dwight Smith, General Counsel with the Neighborhood House Association in San Diego, California, and Ms. Sarah Lyman, Executive Director of Alliance Healthcare Foundation. Again, thank you to both of you for being with us. And also with me today are my fabulous co-hosts, Dr. Undraye Howard and Dr. Loretta Howard.
Hello.
Yeah. So before we went to break, Dr. Loretta had asked a great question with regards to the difference between managing an organization and being part of that policy body. Sometimes, board members want to be very helpful, and in being helpful, they may become very engaged to the extent that where they might even dip a toe into what one might think might be maybe running your organization. I'll maybe start with Sarah. I'll probably start with yourself and ask what might be some challenges that might be associated with board members becoming engaged in actually running the operations of an organization.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, the optimistic way to look at that is that they're engaged, they care, that's great, but trying to harness that energy in ways that are productive and effective can be challenging. I think the danger of managing by committee or sort of from afar, I guess I would say, is that it's inefficient. It can create some confusion and it really undermines the credibility or the authority of your leadership team, whether that's executive director or senior staff. And as a board member, you're typically not involved in the day-to-day, so you're probably not aware of maybe some really critical nuances that cause the organization to function effectively. Like, for example, we all have managed teams. You've got, anytime you get a diverse group of human beings together working towards a common goal, the way that that particular group of humans works together is going to have nuances. There may be sort of a specific way that a certain individual responds to criticism or feedback that's, you manage as a staff day to day, but that a board member might not know. Similarly, maybe there are, external politics that could get, triggered. There's just so many nuances when you spend your day waking up every day doing this work that board members couldn't, know fully and grasp. And I really think that undermining, causing confusion is a maybe unintended consequence of when there's too much involvement in operations. And I think this is in examples where that might be happening, it's a really great opportunity to lean on your board chair or, your governance committee to support just broader, education around governance versus management. What's the role of the board versus the staff? Because it can put your team in a really awkward position. As the board is your boss, and so you don't necessarily want to be in a role where you're having to, course correct your boss. And so leaning on your board to support those redirections is a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Sarah. Dwight, anything you'd add?
Just a couple of points. I believe there's a work culture that is shared among the employees and the executive director and a different culture that the board members may experience. As Sarah mentioned, there's relationships and nuances with the way people interact with one another, the way they respond. Some people don't respond to open criticism. The gentle guidance. I think that's what your CEO and your executive director are there to get the most out of the team that they have. They know that team best. And when board members go too far, they really act outside the scope of what their duty, and that could potentially subject them to personal liability, right? So, I mean, this is a subject maybe for later, but every organization has insurance. So the coverage for a director, what they're supposed to do is different than your officers, right? So directors should not be involved in employment decisions to hire or fire because that puts them in a direct line of possible litigation where there's no coverage for directors being sued for wrongful termination. Directors are covered for policy-making decisions, right? So you can very easily stray, a director can stray into like dangerous, a lot of landmines when they engage directly with staff. That staff person may feel harassed. That staff person can claim they're being discriminated against. Directors don't need to be involved in that day-to-day, front of the line battleground. So it's better, it's just more efficient. It's more cost effective for a director to just kind of like stay in your lane, right? Do the best you can to advise. You can maybe recommend to the CEO, have you talked to that employee, but going and talking directly with that employee, I would say is out of bounds.
Thank you, Dwight. And I'll just be clear for our listening audience. In the term in which you're using directors, you're speaking of board of directors.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Dr. Dre.
Yeah, good. Wow, wonderful answers around the challenges. Lots of challenges. Here's a question I had that I think our listening audience may want to hear more about. Is what are your thoughts about the ideal composition of a board? And I'll be fully transparent. When I think about a board, this was years ago, I wanted the heavy hitters. I wanted the rock stars. Give me the entertainers. Give me the folks with the money. Load my board up with folks who are rich and popular. I don't know if that all worked out well for me at the end, but Dr. Smith, what's your thoughts on the ideal composition of a board?
I would start by saying, is the purpose of the board to fundraise, right? Because if it's fundraise, I want the rock stars as well. I want the singers. I want people who are known in the community, people who've written books, people who can generate an audience or following. If I'm working for like a typical nonprofit board, I'm looking for someone who's kind of connected to the community. They have lived experience, diversity. I like diversity of age, diversity of experience, the size, thoughts, ideal composition. I like odd numbers, so try to avoid deadlocks. That doesn't always happen that way, but a board of 13 or 15 or 17. And then that you also have to consider a quorum. If you meet frequently, you have to worry about, the larger the number of board members, the more difficult it may be to get a quorum. So all those things are kind of required to before you figure out, well, what's your ideal member of your board. Staggered terms, that's another thing I like to have. Ideal composition of a board would be there's never one year where a mass of your brain trust is leaving, right? If you have 13 members, you probably plan it, well, no more than 3 leave every year, and you have a flow of that nature. So the ideal composition is, a number that will help you attain quorums, a number that has the diversity, and also the number that you can get the experience that you need. If you're in real estate, you probably need people who know more about how to finance real estate. If you're in the educational business, you probably need educational people who work with that population. That's what I would say.
That's great. Ms. Lyman, anything you would add to that? And before you answer that, I had my cousin Junebug wanted to be on my board. He said, I gotta be a part of your board. Any thoughts about family members and real close friends being on the board as you think about this particular question?
Yeah, I might let Dwight as the attorney answer that one, but I do have some more to add afterwards.
Okay, please.
Oh, Junebug, yeah, cousin Junebug or brother. The idea is that it's difficult to have family if you don't. You should be able to feel comfortable firing someone without having all the family dynamics. You should be able to call them out, and you should not want to create the appearance with your other board members of any preference, or someone's getting special treatment, or someone's there only because of, the last name that they carry. So I think that it's best to avoid, I think, a family member, unless, there's always exceptions. If that family member, I don't even want to begin, but yeah, there are certain situations where it would be helpful.
Sure.
But as a general rule, it's the conflict and the appearance of a conflict that you want to avoid. You want to have your board feeling everything is above board. There's no insider deals going on. There's no favoritism, things of that. Yes.
Well,
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think on the broader question of just the ideal board composition, I agree with everything Dwight said. When I think about, the ideal board, I think of you want diversity of perspective, lived experience, professional experience, skills, background. I think that's essential to really being able to leverage a group of diverse thinkers so that your organization can benefit from that and, grow. I also think stylistically, I have found that the boards that I've worked for and with and on that are most effective have people who are able to disagree well.
Mm,
They can navigate conflict productively,
right.
and they're not conflict averse necessarily. They welcome diverse perspectives. They really lean in and try to understand the other, position. I think that's essential because boards should be, they should be the wind in the sails of the organization, not a cog in the wheel. So if you have, especially if you have, a really diverse board with lots of different experiences, naturally, people are going
Mm,
to come to the table with different lenses on the world, on issues, on questions. So they need to be able to work through those differences productively. And I think that's partly stylistically the kind of, board member that you can engage, but of course it's also cultural, and it's a yeah, a culture that can be nurtured by, structural things that you do, by onboarding. The last thing I would say is that I think trust is essential for board effectiveness. I think we'll get into this later, but there is no amount of time, I think, wasted developing relationships, trust, and understanding among, board members. It's one of those, go slow to go fast kinds of elements when it comes to board governance.
thank you.
All right, great. Going on to our next question. I'll start with Dr. Smith. Can you share an experience of working with a well-functioning board? And what did that actually look like? And what do you think helped them to work so well together?
A great question. So I currently serve on the board of Alliance Healthcare Foundation. I'm on the executive committee, on the program committee, and chair of the nominating and governance committee. What I find what works very well for Alliance is you have to design and plan for time in your committees to have robust conversations. It's not just a rubber stamp, it's not like here's this item, approve it, and move on. You need to have time for appropriate discussion about a matter. I think that's really important. A lot of work should be done in the committee structure. So board members need to trust their colleagues. So if a colleague in the finance committee is, representing and they're coming forth with a proposal or a recommendation, I think it's great for all the other board members to give that committee its due respect. They've dove in, they've done the hard work. It's not to mean you can't ask questions, but go in with the understanding or appreciation that most of the hard work has been done. The typical questions have been asked. So that's just a framework to start from. It's also important for a board to take time for opinions to be heard. I think Sarah said it perfectly. Alliance is my example of a well-running board. It's important to take time to seek consensus, but understand the importance of being the lone wolf, right? On an issue. Organizations like individuals, I think, have blind spots. So it's good to be aware and not always assume that what you think is true may no longer be true. So I think a well-run board has time to make certain everyone has an opportunity to express themselves. They may not choose to, but simple things like go around the table, make certain everyone is put on, okay, what do you think, Ms. Lyman? What do you think, Ms. Howard? So when you call a person, you almost encourage them, like, we feel what you have to say is important. So that's something I've learned. NHA is also a very well-run board. It's much larger. It's all volunteer. And I see the dynamics between volunteers who, really are busy with their daily life, and then Alliance may actually pay for committee service. So sometimes pay for being on the board. So There is a lot of focus that is brought into play when people are being, either fairly compensated or they feel their time and opinions are valued. So, I see it working both ways, being volunteers and having a board that is compensated for the time are great examples of getting the best talent, right? And when people are not just coming to you after a long day, they come refreshed, ready to work. Yeah. So those are examples I see of Royal One boards, and Alliance represents that to me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dwight, and thank you for that question, Dr. Loretta. When we come back, I want to hear Sarah's response to that question as well, and also maybe hear what might be some of the pitfalls that our guest might alert us to looking out for and maybe staying clear of. So please stay with us. We'll be right back with more on Leadership Matters, the People's Doctors, informing leaders, inspiring solutions. And we are back with more on Leadership Matters. Today, we're discussing effective board governance and development. Our guest on today's show is Dr. Dwight Smith, who's the General Counsel with the Neighborhood House Association, and Ms. Sarah Lyman, Executive Director of Alliance Healthcare Foundation. In a moment, I'm going to give Sarah an opportunity to respond to the question Loretta had asked about well-functioning boards. And it was brought to my attention that I did not ask the second audience question. So I'm going to have us pause and do that. And Dr. Loretta, I'll invite you to respond to this second audience question first, and then Dr. Undraye, and then we'll have our guest to listen in, and maybe you might want to chime in on it as well. So the question we have is, let's see, we have a board member who is a significant financial donor and influential in the community. However, they are abrasive and often context line staff directly wanting to direct and engage in staff level activities. Their behavior is disruptive. Any ideas on how to handle this behavior?
Oh my goodness, what a wonderful question that is. Okay, let me get the laughter out first because that's very real.
Mm.
Oh my goodness. My first thoughts, my initial thought is that a conversation needs to be had with that person about the expectations, the role that they actually play on the board. You don't want to lose them, especially if they're a significant financial donor, but maybe you can redirect them in some type of a way. And I think earlier, one of our guests, when we had another question, had talked about sometimes you might need to redirect them. It's like they have these wonderful strengths in a certain area, and we really need you to focus in on that instead of the day-to-day operations of the organization. Sometimes letting them know your expertise is so much appreciated. But I would also want to have a conversation with the staff. If that board person comes around asking questions, please direct them to the executive director of the organization, because I would not want the staff to be feeling intimidated or that they just had to do it. It's like, just redirect them and we'll address it. So, but I look forward to what you all have to say on that one.
Yeah.
Dr. Loretta, how about yourself, Dr. Dre?
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely everything Dr. Loretta said, I certainly absolutely agree with. At first I was thinking, there's a significant financial donor. Staff, get over it. We need to get that money from that board member. So, but I know we can't do that. So I would certainly make sure the staff understood the boundaries and give them some kind of possibilities in terms of how to respond to a board member, redirect them, that kind of thing. Maybe you have to get the board chair involved with having a conversation with this particular over-engaged board member, maybe reference some established policies that you have around the duties of a board member versus a regular staff member of the organization might be appropriate as well. And I always remind board members that board service is a privilege, not a right. So, and that's even for our major donors. So I think I would add that to what Dr. Loretta has already added to this question. So excellent question, though.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Trey. And Dwight, Sarah, any thoughts?
This is a real live example. I think this is very common, it's very typical. And it does need to be treated with gentle, right? Gentle. You don't want to be too abrasive towards the board member who serves an important financial goal for the organization. So this is very, very typical. Everything that was stated, I would, again, like you say, have the staff redirect the question, let the staff know, have the director, board member come directly to the executive director. And then you do need to have the conversation with that board member, right? When I see this, when I see significant financial donor, I think of what ways would be effective for this person to get the message, right? So when I see they have significant assets, I always like to remind them, the personal liability that we can share or that you can enjoy as a corporate entity, you're free from personal liability. That's only as long as you observe the corporate formalities. Mm. That means you need to play the role of a director and not go to another sandbox and play the role of the CEO. So that not only puts you at jeopardy for personal liability for your activities, but it's very disruptive. It doesn't move us to where we need to be. We don't need you to perhaps undermine the executive director or the management team. Steer those conversations to your one employee, which is your CEO or your executive director. So it's to kind of remind them, your activities are putting you at risk for personal liability. Who knows what an employee may allege was said to them or the way you made them feel. California is very litigious to begin with. And employee liability is one of the biggest concerns you have in California. You can be looked at the wrong way and someone can infer, improper discriminatory intent. So directors don't need to have any of that exposure. So we just remind them, to allow you to be the good financial donor that you are, please remain in your role so we can protect you and the corporation at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Smith. And Ms. Lyman, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, ever the strategist, Dwight. I love it. I think that the other side of that same coin, or building on that, it's like you're trying to identify what makes them tick, why they're connected to this organization. And so if you can, I agree with all the steps. Talk to them first, set boundaries for staff, engage your board, right? Engage your board chair, maybe some education around governance versus management, but also could be an opportunity to help hone in on the strengths of that board member. So like if they're a big donor, ask them to leverage their connection, keep them busy, raising money for the organization. And of course, obviously not knowing the specifics, at some point the board might have to sort of do a cost benefit, like is what they're bringing to the table worth whatever the abusive, behavior is that's being experienced. So I think that, again, if it's severe, that probably has to be part of the conversation too.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And then I know we didn't give you a chance to respond to the question Dr. Loretta had asked about well-functioning boards. Anything you want to add to what Dwight had shared?
Yeah, I think Dwight really said it well. I mean, I think a well-functioning board in my mind it's a partnership, and it's built on trust, respect, and candor. I think oftentimes we get into this, or I've seen organizations get into a dynamic where, the staff is sort of coming and like performing to the board, like, look how great we are, rubber stamp the things we want. That doesn't engender any genuine trust. So it's almost like you're inviting like the fingers to come in, you need to be able to trust your board with the challenges that you're working through, with the struggles that you have. And that needs to be bi-directional. They need to be able to trust the leadership that you'll handle it, that you'll come to them when something is necessary or significant, and that you'll handle it with their input and their advice, respectfully or correctly. And then I think well-functioning boards, yeah, they really lean into the generative dialogue, to the, it's not just about updates and the business as usual. It's about, are we headed in the right direction? What's coming down the pike? Where should we be pivoting? Not necessarily with the idea that you're going to land that airplane every board meeting, but that it opens up a dialogue and that it helps sort of lift the collective consciousness, I guess, of the board, of the leadership of the staff, to continue to elevate whatever they're doing, to work better. And then the last is, I think, Dwight, you touched on like building consensus and, sizes of boards. Obviously, this depends on how many people you're working with. I think 10, 13-ish is a great number, but there is, I think, a balance between building consensus and having efficiency, having efficient decisions. And you got to know the difference, the board and the staff, between, when issues or decisions really require consensus. And if they do, then they need more time. You're going to have to build in more time to vet all perspectives before you move forward. But there are going to be other decisions that just need to be made more efficiently while you still balance input. So I think boards that can kind of manage that culture, and when there's structure that supports that culture, are typically really high functioning.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah, for your thoughts on that item. Love to ask both of you. I know we're getting ready to move into a break, but thoughts, and maybe we can get a few thoughts from yourself, Dr. Smith, before we go to break, on potential pitfalls that board members might need to be, our boards in general might need to be aware of.
Yeah, I think pitfalls are primarily ignoring trends or red flags, right? I mean, a good board member will have adequate information to make an informed decision. So, asking questions is key, asking for information. If you're not normally provided critical information that you think you need to have to make a decision, a pitfall would be to continue on without following up. There's never a stupid question. Sometimes things are done for reasons that no longer exist. So don't just go along with the rubber stamp. Ask and fully kind of understand why decisions being made. I think a pitfall is to not to truly understand the sources and uses of your funds, right? Where do funds come from? Are we a community foundation? Are we a private foundation? Are we totally relying upon, public support? Or are we a grant-based organization that we need to, be focusing on who is our regulator? So the key question is you kind of need to understand what are the unique risks about your particular organization. I find a particular risk to be watched out for is a cult of personality. You may have a CEO or executive director who is just, a superstar. They could be the model or the face for the organization. But many times that may not be where the organization always wants to go. Maybe that point now, but in the future. So I think the code of personalities, strong personalities could suffocate other voices if you don't allow that time, place, and presence, right? So, those are the kind of the pitfalls, knowing the competitive environment that you work in, recognizing trends, historically, where have we been? Who have we been awarding grants to? Where are our locations, service locations based? So just understanding why and how we do business is pretty critical.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Smith. And Ms. Lyman, I know we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, yours will be the first voice that we will be listening to hear from. So please stay with us. We'll be right back with more on Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors, informing leaders, inspiring solutions. And we are back with more on Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors, discussing effective board governance and development. Sarah, I'm going to toss it right back over to you to hear about potential pitfalls from your perspective. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, well, I won't repeat what Dwight shared. I think those were all great examples. One thing I would add, and maybe this is from the perspective of leadership working with a board, I think there's a pitfall in over-reliance on a small handful of, power players or people who tend to be louder or more engaged, and undervaluing the unique talents that everybody brings to the table. Some of your most quiet board members might be some of your most perceptive, and they may actually be able to help you get unstuck or, identify dynamics that could be improved so that your overall organization can move faster. So I think, I guess I just keep harping on that. Really understand who's around your table, like who are those individuals, what do they bring, and leverage that.
Thank you.
Hey, here's I wish we had more time. I know this has just been a wonderful discussion, but quickly back to you, Ms. Lyman. Quick question. Should organizations assume that given the often wealth of knowledge and depth of professional and lived experience that board members often bring, that they are very well equipped and an orientation or an onboarding training would just be insulting and a waste of time to provide new members? What's your quick response to that? Would that just be a waste of time to go through that for someone who's pretty heavy in knowledge around some of this stuff?
No, I mean, even seasoned professionals need orientation, right? Every organization's got it's unique. It's got its own style, culture, boundaries. Highly accomplished people are going to want to find ways to contribute. So set them up to do that in ways that are helpful to you. You don't want to end up in a board meeting saying, "Oh, thanks for sharing that great idea, but we forgot to tell you we don't actually work like that. These reasons."
Right.
Yeah, I think orientation is critical, and it's not a one and done.
Sure.
You got to keep investing in that connection
Absolutely.
to the work.
Absolutely. Thank you. Dr. Smith, how about you?
Yeah, I'll just quickly just add, I think it's important to always remind the even experienced board members of the particular mission and vision of this organization.
Mhm.
Because I think that's where you want all your actions, all your direction, all your focus to be aligned with your mission and vision. So even if you're an experienced member, the mission of this organization that you're serving on and the vision of this organization kind of helps you reshape your thoughts, your actions, and your behavior towards achieving that mission.
Thank you.
All right, great. And I'm going to ask quickly for your high-level answer to this. Once board members have been oriented, and do you think they need additional training? Are there retreat activities that they should go to? Yes, if yes, what would that be? And if not, why not? And if there are other activities, how often should they go through those activities? Dr. Smith, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, thank you. So I think it's important to always look for ways to keep board members engaged. One thing I've really enjoyed and learned so much, not only about myself, but others, are the personality and interactive style tests and behaviors. I mean, we learn how people could say, go get some milk versus we need milk. And the way you communicate just evokes a whole bunch of different actions. So I believe, yeah, you could continue to have orientations for, board members, so you can even understand their story. What are their unique challenges? What did they overcome? Also, it's just not the orientation. You need to attend community events to help develop, trusted relationships and a positive reputation for the organization. So those are the things that should be happening.
Thank you. And what about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I agree with Dwight. I think, investing in ongoing board engagement, retreats are important. I think at least annually is critical. I think if you assume they're going to retain everything from your first orientation for the rest of their time, you're mistaken. Nobody can absorb that much information at once. So yeah, I think ongoing touch points is really critical.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know it was touched on a little earlier, but just to see if there's anything else you might want to share on term limits. Any thoughts from either of you on term limits?
Sarah, go for it.
Sure. Yeah, I think term limits serve a purpose, and I think you can make it work for your organization whether you have them or you don't. Sometimes you inherit, a system that is one way or the other. I think what you're really striving for is a balance between continuity and renewal. If you have too rigid of a structure that is like you end up losing your best people too soon, or you're hanging on to people maybe a little too long, that's probably not in the best interest of the organization. So having systems where there's sort of regular decisions being either reaffirmed or changed based on about the composition of the board is really important, and really thinking about, Dwight touched on it earlier, having staggered terms so that you really can preserve that institutional knowledge and bring in new perspectives. And you can also leverage committees to do that as well. It doesn't have to be in board seats.
Thank you. Anything you'd add, Dwight, to that? Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, I agree with everything Sarah said. I am generally in favor of term limits, just because people need a chance to refresh the batteries. They need a chance for new ideas to come in. So I'm generally in favor, but I have seen examples where it's important to have a hero or a champion for an idea that cannot be accomplished in a term or two, right? Some of the things I think Alliance has been able to accomplish has been over 10, 20 years of continued focus, consistent focus, even if there's a new board chair. So, I have seen no term limit situation work because of the goals that are trying to be achieved. But in general, I believe the term limits allow for fresh ideas, recharging the batteries, renewal, and give others an opportunity to contribute to the organization as well.
Thank you. I know I've been on boards where the board you may be off for a year, then come back after a year. And that allows for some refreshing. In the year that you're off, you may still engage from an advisory perspective. So maybe that's something to consider. I'm going to toss it over to my co-host and say, where do you guys want to go next? I know we are needing to wrap up pretty quickly. Dr. Loretta, you want to ask about?
Yes, I am so sorry. Okay, the question that we're asking each of our guests, is that where we are right now? So what brings you joy and what do you hope for? Starting with Sarah.
Sure. Yeah, I think, what brings me joy, I mean, on a personal level, cherishing moments with my kids as they grow up. They're in middle elementary years and the time's passing quickly. And what do I hope for? I think, I don't know, right now I'm hopeful that we're maybe raising, or we can raise a generation of listeners who really collaborate across differences to solve practical problems. Wellness, the chance to thrive should belong to everyone, and it shouldn't be political. So I'm hopeful that we can raise people who, can really collaborate across differences.
Thank you. Dr. Smith. Sorry about that, Dr. Loretta.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Smith. Yeah.
Yeah, I get much joy from mentoring our younger people who are coming, on our footsteps, giving them advice, guidance, to have these individuals eventually find their way into corporate life. I really believe that actions taken in the boardroom can be more impactful and more immediate than actions taken in the courtroom, because you have a chance to immediately influence decisions, not waiting for some law to be obeyed. But, corporations have a lot of power about, who they endorse, who they support, who they advertise to. So I believe inspiring youth to be more involved in the corporate side of board member participation can bring about much quicker results to help bring about better community for all of us.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you, Dr. Dwight Smith of the Neighborhood House Association in San Diego, California, and Ms. Sarah Lyman of Alliance Healthcare Foundation for all of your contributions today. And to my wonderful co-hosts, Dr. Dre and Dr. Loretta, thank you also for joining us. And to our listening audience, thank you also for being with us. Please join us every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or download our podcast at your convenience on demand for more ideas on how you too can make your leadership matter. Thank you.